You're listening to the Sales Today podcast, and I'm your host, Fred Copestake. On this podcast, we explore how sales professionals can develop a modern approach to winning business, the application of virtual selling techniques, how to create meaningful business relationships, and much more. Why not take our free collaborative selling scorecard to see how your sales approach suits today's environment? You'll find a link in the show notes. And welcome to this episode of the Sales Today podcast, where I'm delighted to be joined by Martin Stella. Martin is the author of the book Sales for Nice People. So, Martin, welcome, sir.
Thank you. It's really good to be here.
I'm very pleased you've come because it's kind of like one of the easiest questions to ask at the beginning. What is sales for nice people? Who are nice people? Why did you write it?
One question at a time.
I know that's bad skills, isn't it?
Sales for nice people.
But I've got so many that I want to understand.
All right. Let's see how far we get. Sales for nice people is the result of 30 years of study into human nature, psychology, motivators. It is a philosophy, it's a book, it's a website, it is a training, it is a way of life. It is how you hold yourself out in the world as a good egg, as an integrous entrepreneur who wants the best for people without having to be scuzzy, sleazy, or pushy about it. It is a way of selling more without having to go against your values.
Wow. Hang on, I couldn't write faster. I asked all the questions at once, didn't I?
Mm-hmm.
You answered them all. So it's philosophy book, website, training, way of life.
Yeah, well, for me it is. I mean,
yeah, go on, tell me more about that.
Nice people often think that because they have the values and the integrity, selling isn't really for them. And that's a crying shame, because then you end up not having effective conversations with your buyers. They then don't end up buying from you, even if you would be the most qualified. And then they might have to end up buying from somebody who is less qualified or less integrous. So it's a disservice if you're not able to sell your work, especially if you're a high integrity entrepreneur. And so I wrote this book over the course of 30 years, basically, in order to enable good people to not lose out. Because it's usually the high integrity people who lose out and don't get the sale. I think that is wrong, and it doesn't have to be that way. When you learn how to turn selling itself into an act of service, you get to sell as much as you want at really great prices, and you don't have to lose the buyers. And so in order to help people, well, people like me a number of years ago, when I was a tailor, I didn't know how to sell. And so I lost a lot of deals that I should have gotten because I thought quality sells itself, which is, of course, a ludicrous notion. But if you're fresh out of a monastery and you make great suits, you think that your great work is going to do the selling for you. And it doesn't. And I struggled through a bankruptcy because of that. And it was only afterwards that I realized, gradually, bit by bit, discovered really that if I go back to my roots as a former monk, where serving people is the number one goal, then I can use that and deploy that in order to have more sales. And so I wrote the book to enable people to get more out of all the work that they do in generating leads and having the buyer conversations.
Brilliant. I mean, what a potted history there. So if I just rewind back, fresh out the monastery, how long were you in monastery for?
I was there for 12 years.
12 years in the monastery, went on to become a tailor. Is that with skills you'd learned?
Well, they trained me to be a tailor.
Yeah.
So once I left, the logical thing was to start a tailoring shop, and I made some really fancy suits. And I had no idea what I was doing. So yeah, that was that crashed and burned in just the space of a few years.
And I mean, whether you answer this as you or kind of nice people in general, because it's probably a similar answer. Do you think it's that nice people don't do any selling at all, because they feel as though that sales must be this sleazy, manipulative, this
Mm.
kind of caricature of salespeople that we see on
Mm.
telly. And so they just don't do anything. They don't put themselves out there and do all that great stuff that they could do because they think, no, that's not me. I'm not even going to play this game. Is that where
Some
it falls
people,
down, or is there a different way?
well, some people just really want to pretend that sales doesn't exist, and they hope that buyers are just going to show up and throw money at them, which interestingly is actually a bit of entitlement. Because if you think that because your work is so good and your integrity is so high, that then merits people throwing money at you, well, then you're actually being entitled.
Mm.
Nobody gets the sale without making an effort and having conversations with people. Now, the choice of words there is very specific and deliberate. It's not about doing the sales thing, it's about having conversations with buyers. It's about having a conversation in the right kind of context and framework where your goal is to help your buyer make a decision, even if that's not to buy or to buy sometime later in the future, or maybe to buy from somebody else. So it's not your business whether your buyer becomes your client. It becomes your business once they become your client, once they decide to buy. And until that moment, it's not your business. Your only business is helping them get to whatever is the best decision for them. That is an act of service to help people get to a decision. And that's what Sales for Nice People teaches.
I like a lot. But I like that you were deliberate with certain words there, which was about having conversations.
Mm.
I think you were also deliberate in using that word entitled and
Mm-hmm.
entitlement. That's a
Mm-hmm.
strong word, Martin.
I know. Well, you
Have
asked for
you
strong
are you
opinions.
using that to give nice people in a friendly and kind way a bit of a nudge that they need? Is that what you're doing there?
I hope so. I hope that that is the effect it has. Yeah, because look, it's not that you're wrong as a person for thinking that you deserve the sale. It's that it doesn't work that way. No matter how good your work is, and I experienced this. Like my suits were good. I could compare myself to Savile Row and come out without feeling ashamed for my work. Like I did good work, but it doesn't sell itself. The quality of your work is not ever going to be enough to have buyers identify as your client. So you are responsible for doing the work that makes a buyer aware of what you do, how it works, why, what it costs, and why it's worth that money. And this is where nice people very often fall into the nice guy trap, nice guy or nice gal. Right? So this book, Sales for Nice People, is not called Sales for Nice Guys because there's a difference between a nice guy or gal and a nice person. A nice guy is somebody who people pleases, in my definition, where you let your buyer take the lead, where you accept their pushback on price and you give discounts, where you don't take leadership over the process, which your buyer requires you to do. And so then you become a people pleaser who doesn't stand up for their own. That then costs you, that and causes you to earn too little, to be under stress, and then you become less able to properly serve the people who have paid you, all because you're trying to please everybody. No, nice guys will never win. Instead of being a nice guy or a nice gal, be a nice person, which means, in my definition, somebody whose mission is to do right by people, who is truthful, who operates with integrity throughout, and who accepts that as a seller and a provider of quality work, it is your moral and ethical obligation, it is your duty to have conversations with the right people that enable that person to make a decision.
I like that. I like that a lot, Martin. Um, just helping people understand those slight differences.
Hmm.
Actually, I say slight. They're quite big, the differences between that. And the biggest thing being nice guys finish last. Yeah,
Yeah,
but a nice person doesn't. What's that
no,
finishes? A nice person finishes. Now, whether
of
that's
course.
first, last, or in the right place that is right for whoever they're working with and they're serving.
Yeah. Think about the oxygen mask example. right? If you're a nice guy, you go around the cabin giving everybody an oxygen mask. And before you're halfway through the cabin, you asphyxiate and you're laying there in the walkway, unable to help anybody else. Why? Because you didn't put yourself first. You didn't protect the asset. You are the asset. You come first. You need to be taken care of. Because if you're not doing well, if you're not earning enough, if you're not breathing, you can't help everybody. So a nice person makes sure that before anything else, you are able to properly serve everybody who needs your help to the best of your abilities. So you put your own oxygen mask on first. That's a nice person. Nice guy. Okay, right. Go and help everybody else, and then good luck. See you in the afterlife.
So is the first thing that you're doing, kind of running with the oxygen mask story
Mm.
there, is helping the nice guy or girl become the nice person by giving them permission to serve themselves so that they're in this better position to then go out and do all the goodness that they can. Is that the starting point?
Is it my business to give them permission, or should they give themselves permission?
Give themselves permission. My bad.
Mm. Yeah, look,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's very common for high integrity individuals to try and cipher themselves away, to always be there to help other people. But that's how you get burnout. That's how you get frustrated and bitter because life never gives you anything back. And it's not that life should give you anything back, it's that you need to take care of yourself first. If you don't sleep enough, if you don't eat, how are you going to help other people? You always sleep and you eat because you need to be in ship shape. Otherwise, you can't help people. Right. Well, the same thing happens in your sales process. You need to make sure that you are positioned in the right way, that you take leadership, that you are robust and can withstand pushback, and that you can survive the no and the ghosting so that you can ultimately keep serving people and get people, those people who should buy from you, to make the decision to say yes.
Interesting. I think there's different levels that you've talked through there.
Hmm.
So it's almost like a Maslow levels in kind
Hmm.
of, yeah, the physical, the security, and then just some of the robustness, if I can use
Hmm.
that word, when you were talking about some
Hmm.
pushback and ghosting,
Hmm.
which is that, not everyone you deal with is so nice. And they will behave in some strange ways, which can be
Some people
confusing
will.
and might affect you in a
Hmm.
far worse way than it might affect somebody else who just thinks that's an acceptable way to work.
Well, okay, so now you're talking about buyers that possibly you shouldn't deal with.
Uh-huh.
There are people who behave in certain ways that I don't accept. And if I notice certain character traits or mismatch in values or certain types of behavior, yeah, then maybe it's better to go and talk to somebody else and
Mm.
decline the opportunity.
Yeah. Okay. Because again, you used another. I think you use the language very, very deliberately, from
Mm-hmm.
what I can tell, where you said it was something about um, buyers identify as your client.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, so
yes.
so you've got to have a conversation with those people who are most likely to identify as your client to
Mm-hmm.
help them come to the point where they think, hey, yeah, I should be working with a guy like you. I should be buying
Yeah,
from you. Yeah.
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 This is the beauty of the framework. Once people internalize how this works, a lot of people try to win the client. They try to win approval. They try to be all kinds of willing to end up being deserving of the deal. And of course, your buyer has to select you and has to approve of what you're proposing and what you're planning to do and what you want to charge them. But by the same token, you need to approve of your client. You need to both vet each other. It's not just about the buyer saying, yeah, you're right for me. I want you to do my work. You also want to make sure that you are talking to the right person, that this is a buyer that you actually want to work with. And when you have that kind of conversation where you are both vetting each other and it's very clear that each of you needs to make a hell yes decision, then the dynamic changes. You are now no longer trying to win the client. No, you're doing what Donald Miller calls same side selling. no, is that Donald Miller? I think I'm making a mistake there. Ian Altman talks about same-side selling. In a lot of sales situations, you are face to face and you have a counterpart and you have to have a back and forth in order to see if you can win this person. In this same-side selling concept, it's about you and the buyer side by side looking at the same thing and figuring out how to move forward together. That's a very, very different dynamic from what most sales trainings and methodologies are about. And Sales for Nice People leans on the same principle that I'm not here to do any selling to you. I'm here to do selling with you. This is a collaboration. This is a two-part play where we both want to figure out if this is the right deal. And because you are then not pushing anything, you're not trying to convince or persuade anybody. In fact, one of my favorite sayings is, don't convince, don't persuade. You are now talking to a buyer who is not being chased, not being pushed, not being driven to be enthusiastic. And so from a completely rational, non-emotional point of view, they get to decide that, yes, actually, this is right for me. This makes sense. I like this. I like how you treat me. I like how this looks. I like the process in which you're proposing. And I feel as a buyer confident that I'm making the right decision. So your buyer now self-selects, self-identifies as somebody who should buy your work. Your buyer ends up enrolling themselves. That is great stuff. That is how you get people to say, how does it work? When do we get started? When do we get started? Or in fact, people might even say, take my money. That happened to me once when I was talking to a buyer. And does this look like it would make sense to me? Does this look like it would work for you? And you go, yes, take my money. Okay. Apparently this Sales for Nice People stuff works.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I probably sometimes I express it slightly differently, but same thing. It takes two to tango.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the expression I would use.
Yeah.
I talk about thinking like a partner, which is very different from thinking like a vendor and customer.
Absolutely.
Because when you're a partner, you are in it together. And
Of course.
you've used the same word as me, collaborative selling. We co-create, we come at it from the same angle, same side. We're trying to solve this stuff because it's good for all of us. But you've also again said another absolute classic line here: driven to be enthusiastic.
Oh God, yes.
And I've seen so many salespeople here jumping up and down. Come on, this is a brilliant idea for you. It's so good, it's so good, it's so good. You ought to be buying it. And where I'll often counsel people is saying, well, even if it is, that could be quite new to them, and it's change. And if you understand the change curve, they're probably in surprise or anger, rejection, and you're jumping up and down. God, it's brilliant. This is. No, it's not.
Why would you treat people like that? Why would you try to bowl people over with your enthusiasm and excitement? No, let your buyer do that themselves. This is an adult human being who knows how to make decisions. You have no need to get in there and try and transfer the enthusiasm. No, they'll work up their own enthusiasm if you just have the right conversation with them.
Yeah. I because I'm normally glass half full, unless I'm tired or hungry or both. I like to see the good in people. We're a bit like you there. And I think it's because many people do care and they can see the good for the other party. And it's just a poor application of technique because they've been trained badly in, hey, look, we're the best company out there. What we do for clients is amazing. Go out, spread the word. And of course, people don't get really kind of, excited and excitable about that. Yeah. But that's funny. But just do the job well. Let people get themselves excited. That's a cracker. That's great. You mentioned a framework then. So the book has the framework where people can understand how to do this in a, let's say, a logical, a sort of sequential, a stepped way. Could you talk us through that quite quickly?
There is no linearity in any of this.
Okay.
This is one of my big gripes with traditional selling systems. That there's stage 1 and there's stage 2, and then there's the 3 ways to ask for the sale, and there's the 12 ways to overcome objections. And if you go through, look, nothing is linear in life except for time itself. And in your conversation, sure, my framework is systematic in that there's the 4 pillars. There's the listening, the explaining, asking, and then making a profit. And each of those pillars has modes of conversation, questioning and explaining what's in the tin and what's not in the tin, and asking for a no. But there is no linear progression, because depending on where you are in a conversation with your buyer, you might have to go back all the way to the beginning to asking questions about what actually is the problem. Maybe you are talking about the logistics and the price and what the proposal actually should look like. But then your buyer might end up leaning out and suddenly the conversation kind of flounders. All right, so maybe you've asked a question that was too invasive and you need to go back to asking permission for asking questions. Well, permission is something that happens all the way in the beginning of the system. So there is no linear structure. Instead, Sales for Nice People teaches you how to recognize what kind of conversation or what kind of modality of conversation is going to be most useful for your buyer at this point. And sometimes that can be for them to give you all the reasons why they shouldn't buy, so that what you're left with is the reasons that they should buy. And sometimes it's going back to the beginning and really interpreting the meaning of the answers that they give you, instead of just assuming that when they say, yeah, we want a proposal, or when they say, yeah, there's a classic thing that I see with clients sometimes, that salesperson gets on a call and then the buyer goes, yeah, it looks good. And the salesperson jumps on them as if there is a whole world of jugulars to bite into. Great stuff. I'll send you a proposal. But wait, your buyer said it sounds good. That doesn't mean they asked for a proposal. And you now volunteering that proposal means that you might have actually pushed your buyer away because they meant something else. Maybe they meant I have to talk to it. Maybe they meant I have to talk to my business partner about it, or I have to do some numbers and see if it adds up. If you don't verify that you understood properly what your buyer is saying, you might lose the deal, slow down the process. You might set yourself up for getting ghosted simply because you misinterpreted. You fell prey to confirmation bias. We're all eager to move things forward, and your buyer goes, wait, too much too soon, buddy. I'll let you know.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that described as happy ears.
Yes, yes.
Happy ears. Oh, I've heard what. Yeah, no, we didn't say that. So just say again. What were the four pillars? Listening, asking.
Listen, explain, ask, and profit.
Listen, explain, ask, and profit. Okay. Where we're being conscious as to what we're doing, in that it is matching what needs to be done at the time. If I've understood
what
that
kind
well.
of conversation you need to have. So, for instance, in the listen pillar, there is the questions you have to ask, the answers that you get, and what those answers mean. So there's a relationship between the questions, the answers, and the meaning, and confirmation bias is always there. You need to make sure that you get verification on what you think your buyer said, not on what you want them to hear, not on what you want them to have said. Explaining is about what's in the tin, what's not in the tin, and who it is for or not for, so that you give your buyer an option, several options to walk away. If it is not right for them, if it is not perfect for them, and there's the door. We can part as friends. We can save ourselves the time. That builds a lot of trust. This then sets you up for having a conversation where you ask for the sale. If you do that right, you build vision, which enables decision. So the components, the modalities of conversing in the ask conversation is the enrollment, asking for the no, and the open. Because nice people don't close the deal. It's weird to close the deal when your buyer is about to change the relationship with you, start a new phase in their life, start solving a big problem in their world, purchases effectively an upgrade to their identity, all kinds of things open. So in this system, it's not about the close, it's about the open. And profit then is about the price, the package, and the promise that you make. And that promise includes what this person will experience on a personal level in terms of a change in identity. And that is something that in sales gets far too little airtime, because people don't just buy a product or a service. They buy ultimately a new version of themselves. Because if you have a company or you have a role in a company and you finally get a provider on board to solve this big, hairy, sticky problem that has been bothering us and costing us money for the last decade, you are now the person who made that happen. This upgrades you. This is a new phase in your life, This changes your social status. This enables new things in the future for you. And the buyer ultimately needs to recognize what is that change in identity that they acquire along with the product or service.
Okay, this is probably one of the deepest versions of selling outcomes I've ever heard. I
Thank
think
you.
sometimes you talk to people about selling outcomes and it's like, well, yeah, what are you trying to do in the business? Or I'm trying to quadruple the number of leads I've got, or I need to produce more widgets by the end of the month, et cetera, et cetera. You're talking about the identity of the person or people involved in that decision because they become part of it and that's had an effect on them.
Yeah.
Amazing.
That is one of the biggest motivators for making weighty decisions. It's the person who you become next. So one of the things I teach my students is to ask a buyer the question and ask yourself the question, what next version of themselves is your buyer looking to acquire? What is going to change for them on a personal level? How do they change their own perception of themselves? How they see themselves in the world? How are other people going to change their view on them? A buyer is not just somebody with money and a problem and a decision to make. Your buyer is a world unto themselves. And there are millions and millions of considerations that go into it. And one of the most important considerations is, who am I and is this going to make my life better? And that is far, far beyond the technical aspect of buying a website or selling a consulting program. You're talking to a person who's going to change because you enabled them to make the right decision. Talk about that. Have your buyer express what is going to change and watch what happens to their willingness to engage and open up and share and continue engaging right up to the point that they make a decision.
It's interesting. I don't think people get trained enough in this. You know, we might get a little throwaway piece in training like emotion drives motion, and 80% of the decision is made emotionally and good, right? Yeah, anyway, moving on, let's do a bit more med pick. And you know, kind of more logical, structural, easier to map things and things which are easier to have conversation around, hard facts.
Yeah.
But this soft fact stuff, it's a skilled conversation, isn't it?
It's a very skilled conversation. And it is very much I'd like to compare it to coaching, which I like to compare to therapy. So I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I am a coach. I know a few things about psychology. But what you're doing in a sales conversation, if you are an ethical person with integrity, if you're having an ethical sales conversation, the best way to show up is like a coach, where you create a space for another person to have the best possible reflection and externalizing their thoughts and concerns and fears and worries and wants and aspirations so that they get the clarity that they need to make a decision. So if you want your selling to become easier and less pushy, well, start by learning coaching modalities. By the way, Michael Bungay Stanier's book, The Coaching Habit, is a really good intro point to coaching for anybody who's curious about this.
Yeah, no, I mean, I again, we're very much on the same page in that salespeople, or good salespeople, are like coaches, and we have to earn the right, because some of the stuff that you've talked about there, an individual isn't just going to sit and have that conversation with any old Tom, Dick, or Harry. Some person who just rocks up. Why? Because it says in my business card that you've got to tell me these things. No, ain't going to happen. I'm not going that deep with you. I don't know who you are. No, not happening, is it? So there's foundations and work to do to be at that point where someone will have that conversation with you.
Yes, and the best way to start creating a space where this can happen is to base your entire process on gaining and increasing permission. Because a lot of sales conversations abuse the assumption of permission. So like this example with somebody sending a proposal, even though they didn't specifically ask for it, well, that's assuming that you have permission to move that far, to make that step. But your buyer may not feel ready for that, and they certainly didn't give you permission for that. Here you are talking to a buyer and you go, oh, tell me more about that. And they say, well, it's an old problem. It's cost us a lot of money. And there was some problem with the previous CTO. So yeah, it's a tricky thing. You could have extracted a lot more intel and insight on the buyer situation if you would have simply asked for permission first. Hey, you mentioned that this is an old problem. Would you mind if I ask some questions about that? Because that's fascinating. Now you're asking for permission. Now your buyer says, sure, ask away. Now you get to have a conversation, a section in the conversation that really deepens your understanding, helps them feel seen and trusted, and actually helps the sale move forward. Simply because you asked for permission. It's missing permission is one of the biggest hidden deal killers.
Missing permission is one of the biggest hidden deal killers. Wow. Yeah. Absolutely see that. Absolutely see that, Martin. Goodness. I cannot believe where the time has gone.
We can keep going.
We've been, well, yeah, we've been chatting to half an hour, but I think it's something that I need to go away and get my head around. I've just written a book with similar elements to it, as you know, which is why we're talking, because we're on the same page here. But you saw me scribble away here, yeah, where I've taken some of the sound bites and thought these are absolute crackers. I don't know what to title this podcast. You've given me such a good problem.
Well, yeah, that is a good problem.
No, it is, because there's some wonderful sound bites. That's sound bites. That makes them sound cheap. Wonderful ways in which you've described things, which encapsulate some seriously important thinking, which of course is in the book. So look, there's more there. Where can people get the book? What's the best place to grab that?
The best place is to go to martinsteller.com/book. And there's a link. You can get it on Kindle. There will be a print copy at some point, but that's not available yet. Will also be an audiobook at some point, but martinsteller.com/book. That's the place to be.
Okay. We'll pop that into the show notes. And where's the best place to get in touch with you? Same website, LinkedIn?
Yeah.
What's the best?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can also send me a message on my website. I am also planning to build out the Sales for Nice People website. That's going to be a whole product ecosystem with content, and that is going to take some time. If you want to get free content, listeners can go to salesflowcoach.app, which is a little web app I created a few years ago, which has hundreds of articles. It's got some mini trainings, workflows, and that will give people some extra free reading. But the book itself is at martinsteller.com/book.
Brilliant. We'll pop all of those into the we'll pop all those into the show notes. So Martin, I think we probably do need to do another episode. I think I know.
I'd love to. Yeah.
But thank you for coming along and just starting our thinking on this. It's really kind of you to do that. Thank you for listening to the Sales Today podcast with me, your host, Fred Copestake. I hope you've enjoyed what you heard today. If you did, please get in touch and hit subscribe. And remember, you can take the Collaborative Selling Scorecard for free to check out how your sales approach works in today's environment. You'll find it in the show notes.